you seeing this thing here on the screen, or am I only seeing it? Whatever I'm sharing, it says you're sharing,
I
stop sharing.
I do see it. I see what you're sharing, and it looks like I may be just seeing the top half of it. So I see down to about where it says request e-signature on the left bottom.
Request e-signature. Okay. All right. So you're seeing the big part. Okay. Because I'm seeing now like a minimized version that's superimposed on your picture, but you're seeing the whole thing. Is that correct?
I think I do, yeah.
Okay. All right. So when I do this now, is it gone?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. All righty. Okay. Let's go.
In Yeah, in my view, I'm on the top and you're below me.
Yeah. You're on the side of me. I'm on the left. You're on the right.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready to get started, we can go through that
I'm ready.
document.
I'm ready.
Okay, give
Do
us
you
a
want to
little
do an intro or
introduction of.
something?
Yeah, I'd like you to go ahead and tell me your your background a little bit, who you are, what you're trying to accomplish here with this presentation, and the uh, the ramifications of it if you have that far, if you've gone that far with it.
Okay. All right. So are we recording?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. All right. I'm Alex Wallenwein, and I'm just a regular guy, just like everybody else. Although I did go through law school and I practiced law for 20, no, not 20 years, 12 years, 20 years ago. And I quit in disgust. I'm no longer practicing law. I'm now a paralegal, but I still know how to research and still know how to read English. And I have been looking at how courts interpret language, both in the Constitution and in statutes. And what we're discussing here tonight is basically, it's all based on that. But I'm making not an argument per se, it's not really a legal argument, it's a free speech argument that holds to what the courts call the textualist approach of interpreting statutes or the Constitution.
A matter of
In my view,
interpretation.
it's the most honest approach because you don't have to assume anything and you don't have to speculate on what other people thought at a certain time or what people are thinking today. You just look at the text of the document and you let it speak for itself because it's probably the closest thing to what the people who wrote it thought, closer than anything else, closer than any speculation that you can introduce about it. So I'm just taking that approach. Of course, it has its own drawbacks, but I think they're minimal compared to the drawbacks of the other approaches, which are original intent and the so-called, especially when it comes to the Constitution, the living Constitution thing, right? It's a living document and it has to change according to how society changes. So it doesn't mean anymore what it meant when they wrote it. We're operating under completely different parameters and we can basically twist it into whatever we wanted to say. That's the
Yeah.
current, or let's call it the social progressive or the socialist progressives approach. They prefer that one. Okay, then other people prefer the original intent approach, which means they look at everything from the view of what they think the founders thought when the founders wrote it. But again, that's speculation because you have to look outside the document to see what you think they might have thought. You must read other things, maybe the founders' thoughts, maybe the founders' writings, maybe the constitutional debates. But the problem with that approach is that what the founders finally wrote in the Constitution, that's what they wanted in there, not what they debated. If they debated something else and it doesn't appear there, then it's probably not what they intended to be in the document that they finally voted on. So that's the approach I'm taking.
And to play devil's advocate just for a second on
Yeah.
that point, do you think that terminology changes enough over time that our understanding of original writings might not convey the original meaning?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Terminology does change to an extent, but a statute is still a statute. A book is still a book. A constitution is still a constitution. Rights are still rights. They might have used slightly more flowery language back in the day, but the words they use still convey the same meaning today that they used back then.
Okay, that's the question.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. Okay, so do you want to go through that document and start going through the different stages of it? Let me select my screen here. It's called the
Yeah,
tax you
let's do
don't
it.
owe. Okay. So the preface is, we already discussed that to a point here, the way of interpreting the tax code and the Constitution according to what these two documents actually say, and not according to what others in the past or in the present have said about them or are saying today about them. This method is called the method of textualism. It's a method of statutory and constitutional interpretation. And then we already touched on original intent and the living document approach. And we're today discussing this subject here from a textualist approach. Now, luckily, the currently predominating approach in the Supreme Court is the textualist approach, but doesn't mean that they have totally forgotten the other ones, and that always flows into the discussion and into their argument sometimes. But the predominating view today, especially with the 6-3 majority we're supposedly having in the Supreme Court right now, from the conservative point of view, among those, the textualist approach is the most favored one most of the time. Let's put it that way. Truth is truth, and what a document actually says is probably closer to what its authors wanted to say than what others might divine from their own interpretation of what yet another group of people now think or once thought. So here we go, going right into the discussion of it. As early as in the Hilton case in 1796, the US Supreme Court literally did an end run around the Constitution, specifically around the restrictions embedded in the wording of the taxing clause of the Constitution. The Hilton case dealt with the issue of whether a tax, this back before there was any income tax, you have to understand, way back before then. Back then there were only direct taxes, and what the court then referred to are indirect taxes. And the question before the court was whether a tax on carriages that carried people was a tax on property or a tax like an excise on the use of property. And the court decided that a tax on carriage was not a tax on the carriages because of their ownership, but it was a tax on the use of the carriages, and therefore fell under the rubric or the category of an excise. Okay. Now, what I did not put in here yet is the direct quote from the court about what Justice Patterson actually said, but it's very close to what we're discussing here. So I think that we can get through this without seeing the actual quote. Now, the taxing clause states, Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. That's a very simple comma-separated list, and there is no indication in there that duties, imposts, and excises are part of the word taxes. Now, in the Hilton case, Sir Justice Patterson said that duties, imposts, and excises are just examples of taxes, which structurally, linguistically, grammatically cannot be the case. That's about as close to the truth as claiming that in a list of apples, oranges, bananas, and grapefruit, oranges, bananas, and grapefruit are all just examples of apples. It's just not that way. So we're left with this. Taxes, duties, imposts, and excises are examples of the superordinated category of government impositions or exactions. Just like apples, oranges, banana, and grapefruit are examples of fruits. Very simple. This obvious fallacy led to the Supreme Court eventually rubber stamping Congress' more recent efforts in 1913 to immensely increase its taxing power, all at the expense of its fidelity to the Constitution and to we the people of the United States. So basically, we have to go back to what the 16th Amendment says. And I'm going to include that in here in the text of this for easy reference for, in the next version of this document. Basically, the 16th Amendment says that Congress shall have power to lay and collect. Let me just go to the actual text here so I don't make any bad presumptions. Okay, it literally says, can you see what I'm looking at, or do I have to lead that bring that into the screen?
No, I don't
Alvin,
see it.
you can't see it. Okay.
No.
Let me see if it will do that. Okay, so I'm sharing. I'll have to stop sharing this thing, then share again, go to the screen. Oh, it just shows documents that I've opened. It doesn't show me the internet. Okay, I'll just read it. It's okay. No problem. So it says, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. Now, the reason the 16th Amendment says that is because it was designed to do away with what is called the rule in Pollock's court, or Pollock's case. The Pollock case was 1894? Is that right? So do you remember? Off the top of my head, I think that's what it is. And it dealt with the income tax of the day. And the court there said a tax on the income from property is the same thing as a tax on the property itself. And therefore, the entire tax act is unconstitutional. Okay. So later Supreme Court decisions, like the Bruchaber decision, explain that the 16th Amendment does not create any new taxing power. It only did away with that rule. It basically overruled the Supreme Court by constitutional amendment, claiming now or stating now that the Congress does have power to lay a tax on incomes without first apportioning it among the several states, because apportionment is basically a logistical nightmare for the government. If they had to apportion every income tax, they would have to write a new one every year and then divide the tax up among the states according to their respective population, and then extract from everybody's income a certain amount. It's a total nightmare. It's not feasible in the modern day. And that's why the living document people don't like the text of the Constitution. It's too restrictive for them. They say it doesn't fit our situation today anymore. We're living in such an advanced society that we cannot possibly tax people with apportionment. So we go that route. Okay. Now let's go back to our discussion document. So as a result of this misinterpretation of the taxing clause, the Supreme Court itself, not the Constitution, fabricated an artificial dichotomy between direct taxes, which are in the Constitution, and indirect taxes, which are nowhere to be found. Even Justice Patterson in the Hilton case said way back when that the Constitution doesn't talk about indirect taxes. The word indirect doesn't even appear in it. So you had the gall to say that, but at the same time claim that duties, imposts, and excises are indirect taxes. There's no textual support in the Constitution for that proposition.
Or are you going to add that part into
So
the
here we
document?
look at the two portions or the two clauses of the Constitution that mention direct taxes. And taxes are only mentioned in connection with direct taxes or as a dichotomy between taxes and duties. So this here is now U.S. Can you see the screen that I'm screening? Can you see the document?
No, you're not. You're not sharing the screen
Or
anymore.
do you see me or do you see the document?
I see you.
Alvin?
I see you.
Alvin? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Do you hear me?
I can't hear you.
You hear me? You can't hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I hear you.
I can't hear you for some reason.
The document is not showing.
Internet's on. I see a picture. Hello? Can you say something?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? No? You can't hear me?
Hello?
You can't hear me?
Did you mute yours? I can't hear you.
Well, that's not good.
Don't know what to do. Can you hear me? Can you put up the thumb? Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay, I can't hear
Yes.
you. Well, let's
Yes,
just
I hear
continue
you
then.
fine.
As long as something comes up in the chat, you can see the document. Can you see the document right now?
No.
No. Okay. All right. You can see it now?
No.
Okay. Okay. This is U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. Remember, Article 1 is the powers of Congress. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states. We don't need to go any further in that one. And then the next one says, no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. Okay, so both of these times the word tax comes only with the word direct. There is not a single portion of the Constitution that talks about an indirect tax or even uses the word indirect, as we said. So then in point number 8, we get to declaring duties, imposts, and excises to be essentially just forms of taxes allows the court to falsely classify the income tax as an indirect tax. And because of that, only subject to the rule of uniformity, not subject to the rule of apportionment. That's what the 16th Amendment deals with. It makes sure, or tries to make sure, that the income tax does not need to be apportioned because it's simply an indirect tax. But as we see, there's no support of that in the document itself. Number 9, the 16th Amendment, which purports to allow unapportioned income taxes, is an outgrowth of this fallacy and is fundamentally incompatible with the rest of the Constitution. The fallacy now, in turn, freed Congress' hand to impose its own version of Karl Marx's heavy graduated income tax on we the people without apportionment. So if this dichotomy created by the Supreme Court in the Hilton case did not exist, then taxes would automatically mean apportionment. That means there's no such thing as an indirect tax. All taxes are by definition direct. And that is plank number 2 in the platform of Marxist Communist Manifesto. Now, let's go back to interpreting the tax code. We turn away from the Constitution now and we turn directly to the tax code. Surprisingly, in the current tax code, when it's interpreted with textual fidelity, it shows that the income of citizens of the United States is simply not taxed. But that truth is hidden in the definitions section of the Internal Revenue Code, which is 26 USC section 7701A. Subsection 30 of that, which is 7701A30, subdivision A, says it makes crystal clear that citizens and residents of the United States can never be properly classified as individuals or persons, which are defined in subsection A1. And it has a little superscript here, the three I's. I'll put it down into the footnotes or the endnotes of the document so we can go down all the way here to 3 and see what the definition of person says. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation. All right. So to be a person, you have to be an individual. Of course, they're using the term individual here in the textbook sense or in the dictionary sense. Individual itself is undefined in the code. And that means that we're using the textbook meaning, which is, or the dictionary meaning, which is just any natural person. But the problem here is that this definition is a broad general definition, and it's what's called an includes definition. That means an open-ended definition. An includes definition means that other things not listed here can theoretically be part of the meaning of the word. So if you're just looking at this definition by itself, the 7701A1, it is possible that citizen or resident could be included under individual, if you're just looking at this part. But now we go over here to 26 USC 7701A30, which is the definition of the term United States person. And it says the term United States person means, which means only what follows becomes part of the term. The term United States person means A, citizen of or resident of the United States, B, a domestic partnership, C, a domestic corporation, D, any estate other than a foreign estate, and E, any trust if it's a foreign trust, basically. Because it says means right here, it literally excludes individual and person, because individual and person are not listed over here. Okay, so under a strict reading or a strict textualist interpretation of this definition, the term United States person excludes the term person, even though we got the word person up here in the term defined, but that's where most people get thrown off the track. Because when you define a term in law, then the defined meaning of the term becomes the only term applicable to that law. It's called a term of art. So United States person only means what is listed here, nothing else. That means, again, if person is not listed down here, then it's not part of the definition. Also, if individual is not listed there, then it's not part of the definition of United States person. And now we come to Burgess versus United States. It's a fairly recent decision from 2008, and it states a definition that declares what a term means. Back here, we got that word up here. Generally excludes any meaning that is not stated. Again, and it's citing to Colautti versus Franklin, an older decision from, I think, from 1963. Both of them Supreme Court decisions. They are, according to the Supreme Court, the law of the land. But now we go back here. Individuals and taxpayers who are persons under the code are the only class of human beings upon whose income sections 1, 3, 55, 1401, or subchapters A and C of the code expressly impose any tax. Which means there's not a single section in the tax code that imposes by expressly any tax on the income of any US citizen or residents. It's all implied in the meaning of person and individual, but we've seen that the statutory definitions make a definite break between the term United States person and person. Yet, the code is structured and phrased in such a way that every superficial reader and even most legally trained readers automatically but falsely assume that it does impose a tax on the income of US citizens, because everybody thinks that any US citizen is by definition a person or an individual, and therefore falls under the meaning or the sway of section 1 of the tax code, which basically says, in this title, a tax is hereby imposed on the taxable income of every individual. And then it goes through several versions or definitions of what individual or what types of individuals it's talking about. So fidelity to the actual text of the codes exposes this as a falsehood, just like textual analysis of the Constitution proves that there are no indirect taxes. Essentially, because 230 plus years of improper Supreme Court tradition, no legal challenge to this false system has ever prevailed. But you can change it, and only you can change it. We, the people, form a court of our own, a court that is higher than the Supreme Court of the United States in our system. In the legal system, the Supreme Court itself is the highest court, but we form the court of public opinion. Our court is completely off limits to the government thanks to the First and 10th Amendments. First Amendment says we have freedom of speech. 10th Amendment says that anything not directly delegated to the federal government is retained by the states or by the people. So in our court, we can discuss any of these things without anybody telling us that we can't say what we're saying or that we can't think what we're thinking. Even though we're discussing legal issues here, we're still able to do this without legal or court repercussions. They cannot fault us for doing this. The only thing they can do is when we step into their court, then we have to go by basically what the Supreme Court says about taxes. And there you still have the chance to make what is called a good faith argument for the extension, amendment, or reversal of existing law, as long as you can make a good faith argument based on actual law and actual text of the Constitution and actual text of the statute. If you can advance a good faith argument for the extension, reversal, or amendment or reversal of existing law, then nobody can claim that you're making what they call a frivolous argument. Unfortunately, courts are completely conditioned to take anybody who says we don't owe this tax as a tax protester, and they say, okay, you're making a frivolous argument, you're out of here. So by us discussing this in public, basically, and if we succeed in making this a point of public discussion so that everybody can see this difference, that everybody can see that the code itself, the tax code, actually says we do not owe this tax. And if we can see it, then our lawyers can see it. And if our lawyers can see it, then eventually judges will be able to see it. And so somewhere down the line, if we persist, we can get this to become the official view as well, especially these days when President Trump says he wants to do away with the income tax. We got an amazing opportunity right now to actually push this through, because that statement opens this whole thing up for discussion. Now, we're dealing with the government basically trying to tell us Like just in the last administration, they tried to tell us there's certain things we're not allowed to say. And that it cannot do, because the correct order of creation that everybody can understand just by looking at it is the correct hierarchy of power. Applied to the United States is, it looks like this here. It's historically and constitutionally undeniable that we, the people, through our founders, created the Supreme Court because we created the federal government. The creature cannot be greater than its creator. Here's the simple proof. God is on top. He created people. People created the states, and the states and the people together created the United States. There's no historical argument about that. Anybody who says that this is wrong, that's what I would call a frivolous argument. The Supreme Court obviously is part of the United States federal government. We're at the top under God. They're at the bottom under us. So by that fact alone, our court is higher than the Supreme Court. We can discuss whatever we want to discuss. There's nothing the Supreme Court can say about it. There's nothing any president can say about it. There's no law that Congress is allowed to pass to keep us from doing that. Textual, literal truth is plain as day. Duties, imposts, and excises are not taxes, and taxes are always direct taxes under this approach. And here it goes into freedom literally lies at the fingertips of every American citizen. You either follow the law as it's written, or you follow the official lie about what it really says or what it really means. In our court, they do not have the monopoly on that. We do. In their court, unfortunately, until this day, until the court changes its view through a properly advanced argument, until that day, the Supreme Court's decisions that exist up until now, still control. They determine what is law, what is not law. We have to understand that when we step into court and try to make an argument like this, we have basically the entire existing legal structure of the United States government going against us if we try that. But it would be legitimate for us to do it. It's an uphill battle for sure. We live under the rule of law, not under the rule of lies. If we can expose what the Supreme Court did is basically a lie, maybe not an intentional lie, maybe they were just wrong when they said what they said, but it's definitely not the rule of law because it goes against the written law. It goes against what the Constitution says. It goes against what even the tax code says. Under the rule of law, even the government is subject to the law, but only we, the people, can enforce it on the government. History proves the government will never enforce the Constitution upon itself. It will pretend to, so it can keep us quiet and sit happily in our seats and be good consumers, beer drinking, watchers of television, but the government will not enforce the strict wording of the Constitution upon itself. That takes us. Now, how do we do it? And it says we put our finger on the letter of the law and we refuse to pay what the law itself proves we do not owe. That, of course, comes with a risk. It goes against the current interpretation of the law by the Supreme Court, so the government certainly will come after us and try to come after us and say, hey, you're wrong, you owe this money, pay up. But then again, how many of them are they and how many of us are we? And that's what this whole idea of revolting against the federal income tax is about. We're not really revolting against the tax. We're revolting against the incorrect interpretation of the tax code and against an incorrect interpretation of the Constitution. This approach to stating our lawful position is different from the way most income tax researchers approach the issue, and Alvin and I were constantly talking about that subject. Unfortunately, I can't hear him right now, so we can't really debate on screen here right now. We stand on the wording of the law itself, not on what the Supreme Court says about it. And the big thing to take away from this is remember who you are. We, the people, you and I, are the creators of the states, of the federal government, and of the Supreme Court. They cannot tell us to shut up, but we can tell them to live by the law they wrote the law. Congress wrote the way it wrote the law. What we're discussing here tonight, or what we just discussed, is what they wrote for whatever reason. So we have to hold them to it, and by the law that we gave them, which is the Constitution. They have to live by our law. And there we get into the social contract issue. If they don't abide by our law, the contract is off. Why should we abide by their law that they give us if it doesn't comport with our law that we gave them? And that's pretty much the end of the discussion here. It's a non-jurisdictional approach to come to the same basic conclusion, though. Citizens who live in the states under this interpretation of the Constitution and the tax code do not owe federal income tax. Is this different for citizens who live in the District of Columbia, for example? Now, that's debatable. The tax code says that as long as you're a citizen, under our interpretation that we discussed here, as long as you're a citizen, you are not taxed. But then again, the reason why you're not taxed is because the Constitution requires Congress to apportion taxes that are direct taxes among the states. If you're living in the District of Columbia, the District of Columbia is not a state. So theoretically, the Congress would not be required to apportion an income tax levied on people who live in the District of Columbia, in any of the federal possessions, or in any of the federal territories. The end result is exactly the same thing that the people who base all this on jurisdiction are saying. They're saying the government, the Congress, does not have jurisdiction to tax outside of the federal area. That's not quite true, because they can lay an apportioned tax. So jurisdiction is not the issue there. The power to legislate is there. They just have to abide by the restrictions in the Constitution. An income tax levied in the states, because by definition, our definition, it's a direct tax, would have to be apportioned. An income tax levied on somebody who lives in DC does not have to be apportioned. So basically, that takes us through the whole document here, and unfortunately, I can't go back to discussing this with you because I can't hear you for some reason. You sure that your mute button is not pushed?
Yeah. I think that
I can't hear
can
anything.
you hear me at all? You can't hear me
Gallery
at all?
film strip speaker? No, that just determines the screen.
I think the microphone disconnected.
It's a shame.
You can't
How
hear me
about
at all.
now? No.
You can't hear me.
Transcript, settings, mute. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing that I can do from my end that will enable me to hear what you're saying. Full screen. Chat, invite, share. It started when Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
I still can't hear you.
Yeah, I hear you.
Technology. It's always been my enemy.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try it one more time, maybe. Hopefully the recording doesn't blink out on us. All right, bye for now.
All right. Okay, bye.